Her Bak Egyptian Initiate, Chapter 9. Free Will and Fate. Her Bak watched the sky. For months, he lived more by night than by day. One who, quote, knows what pertains to the stars, unquote, will think it a duty to bring out the gifts of so exceptional a student. One who shows such keenness in the search for the truth, accepting no compromise. The astronomer, therefore, was able to carry out a stiff program to train Her Bak in exact observation, in the precise calculation of the stars' courses, in the interpretation of phenomena, and all the while, in spite of such rational exercises, to practice him in the intuitive perception of invisible causes. He habituated Her Bak to live the celestial moments while remaining in touch with nature, to rid himself of obsession with allegories as with appearance. A day came when the disciple noted for himself the effect of certain stellar situations on human disposition and activity. This gave the master profound satisfaction, and in agreement with the sage, he revealed to Her Bak little by little the meaning of certain configurations. Thus, the legend of the 7 Hathors who attend births, bringing the newborn good or bad fortune, became for the attentive pupil a parable showing how forces that flow from the conjunctions of earth and heaven affect men for better or worse. He saw it as a law of necessity, exhibited in the connection of the star pattern, in the band of the zodiac with the hour of man's birth. Patient and profound examination of a large number of cases in nature, those registered in the temple, changed hypothesis into conviction. Time passed. Her Bak taught himself and grew melancholy. The sage watched him. He knew the reason for this. He allowed it to reach a maximum and precipitated a crisis. An eclipse of the moon drew a number of observers to the terrace. The sage and Her Bak, sitting apart with the astronomer, listened while he described the progress of this phenomenon, dwelling on its disagreeable influence over man and vegetable. A profound sadness growing with the moon's reddening gleam completed the disciple's despair. "Fate, what a frightful burden!" he exclaimed. "What negation of personal effort! If our whole destiny is settled by the stars, we can change nothing. Why fight against oneself? It is useless to try and push on at the cost of such sacrifices, with a process that can only work out in its own time." Serenely, the sage watched the moon. "You are right, my son. Nature's fate and the animals is fixed by the stars. What advantage is there for them in knowing how it works? A disappointing enquiry, a useless luxury. You have seen through it. Then abandon such wearisome labour, set up house, feed and clothe a wife. Make your life a long day of happiness, if the stars permit." Despair gripped Her Bak's heart. A sob choked him. Tears he tried in vain to keep back blinded him. The eclipse was now total, and a sound of chanting to the beat of tabors and sistrums came sorrowfully through the night. He rose and shook his fists at the moon and the invisible singers. What use are these shows? Can they hasten by one moment the return of light? All is written in the stars, all is in vain. The sage signed the astronomer not to intervene. If you're sure of this, Her Bak, follow your harpist's advice. Seek less costly pleasures, for it is useless to go against the heart. Heart or reason, no matter. They are ruled by the stars. My instincts, my nature, my body, all is determined by number, by stars, forces whose plaything I am. Why give us the illusion that our heart is master? My heart is a puppet, a slave, like all else, of fate. The sage waited for the storm of primordial grief to abate. Then he lifted his grave voice, and Her Bak seated himself, trembling. My son, there is error in what you have just said. Your heart, seat of enlightenment, seer. It is not here that your divine car dwells, but your car isn't fate's slave, for it is no part of nature. All else on earth or in heaven, even the solar disk that lights us, is part of nature, but the spirit soul, like divine Ra, is not. If the spark becomes conscious in your humanity, it grows into a vital germ, and through this, if you let it govern the animal human in you, you will be master of your fate. The soul is not subject to the stars, but all my being suffers their influences. As you have just suffered the depressing experience of an eclipse, for the instinctive self is subject to them. But as soon as animal man begins to obey his higher self, he only feels them as inclinations, no longer compulsions. The soul is free and can alter its course, but, I repeat, the condition of independence is submission to the immortal consciousness. Her Bak refused to accept hope without certainty. If my soul didn't suffer the influence of the eclipse, yet my lower self rejected the higher, the result is the same. No. You obeyed it when it urged you to examine your doubts. That is where free choice lies. Your body will always feel the influence of the stars. You will free yourself when you learn to be neutral and follow the instructions of your heart without letting things perturb you. This is the way of Ma'at. The wonders that are spoken of it, the promises that are made, would be empty words had they no relation to this fact, that it liberates the man who is conscious of such liberty from fate. Her Bak submitted a point. Doesn't liberty come about by itself, little by little, without the intervention of man's will, as change comes about in a species? It's a remarkable achievement, said the sage, to formulate two resounding errors in one sentence. Freedom is the fruit of personal effort to go beyond nature. As to the development of species, there is no such thing as physical evolution. There is no progress except in the acquisition of consciousness. The existence of species merely seems like a pattern of advance, periodic and regular, with its renewings that have similar but not identical characteristics. Each month, every decade, sees the birth of insects that hatch at the appointed hour. The same law tells a bird to prepare a nest when the time to lay eggs approaches. As well as this sequence, verifiable because short-term, we must also recognize the existence of long-term phenomena that are easily checked. I am speaking of genesis, that produce hitherto unknown creatures. One sees in certain epochs the appearance of animals, plants,
minerals for which no seed is known to have existed, abnormal births following vast movements as if the Earth had changed its place in the sky. This is, in effect, the case. The cause of such apparent sporadic phenomena lies in the universal harmony. Changes in the heavens that give fresh character to an epoch are also the creative causes of such variations. When a new age begins, types that were a product of the precedent era subsist until degeneration of seminal power by exhaustion of the primitive urge, then vanish. Don't let yourself be taken in by so-called accidents that together make a logically seductive picture. Judge by cause, not effect. The cause will be found in the principles of generation. Am I to think, Her Bak asked, that we needn't see the products of nature as an uninterrupted sequence of things that spring from one another by natural transformation? Such a theory would assume a physical perfection of species through gradual evolution. This would be wrong. You told me, said Her Bak, that there is in nature a variety of organs that make a whole in man. Is there also in the animal kingdom an evolution that achieves such a whole in this mammifer? Now you seem to deny it. You confuse evolution with adaptation and sequence, the sage replied. I have said as well that every organ incarnates a principal function which becomes self-conscious in matter. In the act of creation, all possibilities, functions, organs and species are contained as ideas. Their incorporation happens in accordance with stellar times or cycles and looks like a series of accidents. Thus, man is not a synthesis of embodied species or functions, but of cosmic states. A synthesis that can only take flesh when nature has embodied all organs of expressions or expressions of function ideally completed. He is a complete expression of his universe, an effect of a synthesis in the heavens. But in man's primordial state there is no opposition, no duality, consequently no death. He is a complete image of the all, and this must lie in the purpose of the creative cause. But there is also in man's paradisal unity a possibility of scission. As in the creation of heaven and earth, there is then a fall, but scission isn't a necessity. In the complete man there would be a simultaneity of states, and again without division he could have identity with the cause, whereas man fallen, we are conscious of such states as separate and in phases. Creation then is the principle of the fall, while perfection as willed by the cause, and without all that is consequent on the fall, is no longer creation in the same sense, but a manifestation or incarnation of unity. Species are shaping of numbers and functions contained as ideas in the principal creation. Possibilities, that is, made real in the kind of succession outside time, which seems absurd to the cerebral intelligence. The principal creation should be regarded then as a virtual creation that will appear effective to us in corporeality. We can say now that once they have appeared on Earth, species only evolve in consciousness, but they can adapt themselves to the conditions of existence and the necessities of the time. As to the mystery of their appearance on Earth, listen carefully to my answer and try to give the words their true meaning. Each netter, when the time comes, calls into life the particular and the assemblages of particulars that belong to him. This produces the appearance of a continuous process of evolution. If there were such a thing, we should be able to watch the change of mammifier into man and the growth of human intelligence out of ignorance into the highest range of consciousness so far experienced. And the further we look back, the more clearly we see evidence of a state of high knowing that as we go back was more and more a state of receptive intellect or intuition. The nearer we return to the humanity of our day, the more it degenerates, with the progressive complexity of rationalism into analytic materialism, and loses the art of vital synthesis that belonged to the ancient masters. This sacred science has always known of certain cosmic factors that human thought only rejects because they are outside the range of its cerebral faculties. Indisputable evidence of such knowledge proves that there existed in very remote times a higher humanity now degenerate in races that are exhausted, unable to advance otherwise than in the mode of animal evolution. There is no possibility of growing from brute animal into reasonable man. There must therefore be a special inspiration or quickening that separates the human from the animal kingdom absolutely. Was it this quickening, asked Her Bak, that gave man intuitive or infused knowledge, or did he acquire it consequently? Is there an evolution of consciousness in humanity or degeneration? Again, you confuse two problems, that of consciousness in itself and that of evolution of races. We shall study consciousness later. Today I will only say you must distinguish innate consciousness from consciousness that is acquired. The first is implanted in the newborn through circumstances to do with heredity and personal incarnation. This, the intelligence of the heart, is intuition latent. It can be awakened by training. Acquired consciousness arises out of innate consciousness, ceaselessly felt and confirmed in sensory experience. As to the races of men, successive epochs of terrestrial humanity, though they may coexist, have each embodied and developed one of the psychic faculties, the sum of which makes higher man. Realization of the faculty particular to a given race brings it to its peak then, when a fresh human season takes the flowering of the faculty next in succession to its decadence. Take the black race. It began with the consciousness of instinctive nature. It worshipped natural forces and developed psychic vision. Its failure, which is due to the ignorance of the mass, consists in believing that consciousness of this order is its perfection, but its sages are not deceived. Today you notice among ourselves the early symptoms of an analogous miscomprehension in the use of rational faculty. Mental power, now due to be developed, will lead man to an insolent confidence in the superiority of rational thinking, and such an abuse will bring disaster to those who haven't understood the scale of consciousness. Man's highest achievement is the acquisition of intuitive spiritual gifts, which should take cerebral gifts into their service. The sages of a given race are those men who consciously make use of faculties already acquired and develop the specific gifts of their own race, aware that their importance in the scale of consciousness is relative, without ceasing to cultivate subtler modes of knowing. Each race carries its innate consciousness in itself, and the impulse needful for the flowering of its particular endowment. The consciousness it acquires is its own too, but the experience of its elite enriches the consciousness of humanity and makes for its overall progress. Such a race, when this experience is exhausted, may degenerate. But progress made is established in cosmic man. In this way, consciousness evolves race by race through, though each degenerates. Haven't there been at all times men who developed all faculties? Asked Her Bak. Those who brought what was needful into incarnation. These are but individual cases. And there is no and there is no continuous physical evolution of humanity. Evolution of consciousness brings growth in general sensibility. The effort to achieve it is of a vital kind that provokes reaction in the centers and nervous system, in the sexual disposition as well. This brings free will into play, without which there is no freedom. Such growth in consciousness doesn't depend on the will of the intellect or the possibilities, but on the intensity of the inner urge. But such intensity, which distinguishes an elite, is born of disquiet, a conflict caused by shock. When intuitive consciousness experiences a reality that challenges what isn't real in ourselves. Such a shock, so fruitful, is the result of events that leave their mark in the soul. That is why we seek the challenge of brute reality rather than a sensual or cerebral refinement that sterilizes. I understand this by my own revulsions, said Her Bak. Don't revolt if you wish to profit, advised the sage. Accept emotional shock. Hurtful experiences, don't resist them. They are your most useful means of advancement. You would know how humanity progresses, Her Bak. There is no mass advance from race to race any more than from species to species, but there is selection of individuals who will be the seed of the race to follow. Nature pursues her courses by phases, with a tendency to degeneration through inertia. Humanity, left to itself, gains consciousness too slowly, for natural man avoids educative suffering. Yet from time to time there is a prodigious leap. Suddenly, in an exhausted world, an exceptional being arises at a time and a place favourable to his development. Such a one is the manifestation of a higher consciousness that incarnates voluntarily. A presence that awakens others who are so predisposed. In this way, at times can be foreseen, new elites are formed that increase the gain in human consciousness. Her Bak listened with growing interest. The conclusion seemed clear to him. Such, no doubt, was the origin of our wisdom. Yes, and now you will understand what so perplexes teachers in the peristyle. They don't see that in the beginnings of our history witness to the coexistence of primitive life and high knowledge. Master, what peace would come with the solution of this riddle? Try to see where it leads. The man who is outstanding in his time is always one who has faculties that others of his time haven't yet developed. He is the precursor of an age that is on its way to realization and shows the path. The masses won't follow, but those who are sensitive to the new state of consciousness form a group and become the germ of a new race. Thus, races succeed one another in a manner that can be foreseen. For if the exceptional man is a sporadic creation, precursor of what is to come, a group can only form if cosmic conditions encourage it. Such conditions will even constrain a group to look for a suitable country whence migration. here again, said Her Bak, there is determinative action. Necessarily, it is this that enables us to foresee such happenings. This is only possible to vision that sees a whole, advancing because it is living, but obedient to determinative law.